3 days after the arena fight, Sarah found herself in an unexpected situation. Instead of preparing to return to Earth as originally planned, she was attending a formal reception hosted by the station's administrator. The event had been hastily organized to celebrate the historic demonstration of interspecies understanding, though everyone knew it was really about the political implications of her victory. The reception hall buzzed with representatives from dozens of species, many of whom had arrived specifically to meet the human who had defeated HFY. Sarah moved through the crowd with practiced diplomacy, accepting congratulations and fielding questions about human military capabilities with carefully neutral responses. What surprised her most was HFY's presence at the event. The Kythera warrior had requested permission to attend, and she now stood near the refreshment stations, engaged in animated conversation with a group of military attachés from various species. Her defeat had apparently enhanced rather than diminished her reputation as being the only warrior to test human capabilities. In single combat made her something of an expert on the subject. "You seem uncomfortable with all the attention," observed a familiar voice behind her. Sarah turned to find Commander Thex of the Rigelian Defense Force, a species known for their analytical approach to warfare. The insectoid officer had approached her several times during the reception, asking detailed questions about human tactical doctrine. "I prefer action to politics," Sarah admitted. "All this speculation about what the fight means for galactic relations feels premature." "Perhaps, but your victory has already had measurable effects," Commander Thex replied, gesturing toward a group of diplomats engaged in intense discussion. 3 trade disputes that have been stalled for months were resolved yesterday. 2 species that haven't spoken in years are scheduling diplomatic meetings. Your demonstration has shifted the entire balance of perceived power. Sarah frowned at this assessment. One fight shouldn't have that much influence on interstellar politics. But it does because it represents something larger, the commander explained. For centuries, military strength has been the primary factor in determining a species' position in galactic society. Your people have just demonstrated that traditional assumptions about that strength may be wrong. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Ambassador Veltar, who approached with obvious urgency. "Captain Chen, I need to speak with you privately. A situation has developed." Sarah followed the ambassador to a quieter corner of the reception hall, noting that several other diplomats were watching their conversation with obvious interest. "What kind of situation?" she asked. "The hegemony has issued a formal challenge," Veltar said quietly. "They're questioning the legitimacy of your victory over HFY and demanding a more comprehensive test of human capabilities." Sarah's blood chilled. The hegemony was a coalition of 4 aggressive species that had been expanding their territory through military conquest for decades. They controlled some of the richest systems in the galaxy and had little interest in diplomatic solutions to conflicts. "What exactly are they proposing?" she asked. "A trial by combat involving multiple opponents and scenarios. They want to determine whether your victory was a fluke or representative of actual human military capabilities." Veltar's crystalline form had shifted to a worried orange coloration. "They're framing it as a formal challenge to humanity's right to full membership in galactic civilization." Sarah processed this information quickly. The hegemony was essentially forcing humanity into a position where they would have to prove themselves through combat or risk being relegated to second-class status in galactic society. And if we refuse the challenge, then they'll use that refusal as evidence that humans are militarily inferior and should be excluded from major diplomatic and trade agreements. Other species might follow their lead, particularly those who feel threatened by your people's rapid advancement. Sarah realized she was facing the exact scenario that Ambassador Veltar had warned her about. Her victory over HFY had indeed created enemies as well as allies, and those enemies were now moving to neutralize the advantage humanity had gained. "I need to contact Earth immediately," she said. "This decision is far beyond my authority." "I'm afraid that won't be possible," Veltar replied reluctantly. "The hegemony has invoked ancient challenge protocols that require an immediate response. You have until tomorrow morning to accept or decline their terms." The political trap was expertly constructed. The hegemony knew that Sarah couldn't authorize such a significant commitment without approval from her superiors. but they had structured the challenge to prevent consultation. It was a classic example of the aggressive tactics that had made them one of the most feared powers in the galaxy. Sarah's mind raced through possible alternatives, but every option seemed to lead to the same conclusion. Refusing the challenge would damage human standing throughout galactic civilization, while accepting it would risk everything on her individual performance. What exactly would this trial involve? She asked. Multiple combat scenarios against different types of opponents, testing various aspects of military capability. The specific details would be negotiated, but the hegemony is known for designing challenges that favor their own strengths. Before Sarah could respond, Zekai appeared at her side. The Cathara warrior had apparently been monitoring their conversation from a distance and had decided to intervene. "I can help," Zekai said without preamble. The hegemony's challenge protocols allow for advisory assistance from previous opponents. "As the warrior you defeated in single combat, I have the right to provide tactical counsel." Ambassador Veltar looked surprised by this offer, but Sarah immediately understood its significance. Having Zekai's support would demonstrate that even the Cathara respected human capabilities, which might influence other species' perceptions. "Why would you help me?" Sarah asked directly. "Because the hegemony's challenge is not about testing human capabilities," Zekai replied. "It's about maintaining their own dominance through intimidation. Your people represent something new in galactic society, and they're afraid of losing their position." The alien warrior's assessment aligned with Sarah's own analysis of the situation. The hegemony wasn't interested in a fair test of human abilities. They wanted to eliminate a potential threat before it could fully develop. "If I accept this challenge, what are my chances of success?" Sarah asked. Zekai's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "Against hegemony forces using their preferred scenarios? Very low. But if we can influence the terms of the challenge to include scenarios that favor human strengths, the odds improve significantly." Ambassador Veltar seemed troubled by the direction of their conversation. "Captain Chen, you should understand that failure in this challenge could have catastrophic consequences for your species standing in galactic society. The hegemony is not known for giving second chances." Sarah looked around the reception hall, noting how many different species were present. Each one would be watching to see how humanity responded to this challenge. Their reaction would influence galactic politics for generations to come. "I need some time to think," she said finally. "Of course," Veltar replied. "But remember, you must give your answer by tomorrow morning." As the ambassador departed, Zekai remained at Sarah's side. "You're not really considering refusing, are you?" the alien warrior asked. "I'm considering all my options," Sarah replied carefully. "Humans don't refuse challenges," Zekai observed. "That much was obvious from our fight. You could have avoided that confrontation easily, but you chose to face it directly. This is no different." Sarah realized that the Cathara warrior understood her psychology better than she had expected. Refusing the hegemony's challenge would go against everything her training and instincts told her about how to handle threatening situations. "If I do this," she said quietly, "I'll need every advantage I can get." Zekai's expression shifted to what Sarah was learning to recognize as determination. "Then we need to start planning immediately. The hegemony may be powerful, but they've never faced anything quite like human adaptability." The Trade Council chambers were located in the most prestigious section of Nexus Point, a gleaming complex of meeting rooms and diplomatic facilities that hosted negotiations between species from across the galaxy. As Sarah approached the main conference room, she could see through the transparent walls that word of her victory had indeed preceded her arrival. The council members were engaged in animated discussion, their various forms of communication, creating a cacophony of sounds, colors, and even pheromone releases that indicated high levels of excitement. Representatives from 12 different species were present, each one now reassessing their preconceptions about human capabilities. Ambassador Veltar of the Centaurian Trade Federation was the first to notice Sarah's arrival. His crystalline form shifted to a deep blue coloration that indicated respect, a significant change from the dismissive purple he had displayed during their initial meeting 3 days earlier. "Captain Chen," he said in his melodious voice, "please join us. We were just discussing the remarkable demonstration we witnessed in the arena." Sarah took her assigned seat at the circular table, noting that several of the ambassadors who had barely acknowledged her presence before were now studying her with obvious interest. The change in atmosphere was palpable. "I trust the exhibition was informative," Sarah said carefully, "but I hope it won't distract from the trade negotiations we're here to conduct." Ambassador Krex of the Vorthon Consortium made a sound that resembled laughter. "My dear human, everything has changed. Your species has just demonstrated military capabilities that none of us expected. This has implications far beyond simple trade agreements." Sarah had anticipated this response, but she was prepared for it. Human diplomatic training emphasized the importance of turning unexpected advantages into concrete benefits rather than simply basking in newfound respect. "Perhaps we should discuss how improved understanding between our species might benefit everyone involved," she suggested. "Humanity has always believed that cooperation produces better results than conflict." The Zelani representative, an insectoid creature with compound eyes that reflected multiple colors, leaned forward with obvious interest. "Your people defeated our hive fleet in your first interstellar war, and now we see that this was not the fortunate accident we had assumed. What other capabilities has your species been keeping secret?" "We haven't been keeping secrets," Sarah replied honestly. "We simply haven't had opportunities to demonstrate our full range of abilities. Today's fight was the first time any human has faced a Kythera warrior in single combat." This statement caused another round of agitated discussion among the council members. If humans could develop such effective techniques without previous exposure to Kythera fighting styles, their adaptability was even more remarkable than anyone had realized. Ambassador Veltar activated the chamber's privacy field, ensuring their conversation couldn't be monitored by outside parties. "Captain Chen, we need to discuss the strategic implications of what we witnessed today. Your victory over Zekai has demonstrated that human military doctrine may be more advanced than any of us anticipated. Our military doctrine is based on adaptability and learning from others," Sarah explained. "We study every species we encounter, looking for techniques and technologies that we can incorporate into our own systems. It's not advanced so much as it is comprehensive." The Altarian representative, whose people had been among the first to establish peaceful relations with humanity, spoke up with interest. "This explains why your initial diplomatic overtures were so well informed about our various cultures. You weren't just being polite, you were gathering intelligence. We prefer to think of it as being thorough," Sarah said with a slight smile. "Understanding the people we're dealing with seems like a reasonable approach to diplomacy." But the council members were beginning to understand the deeper implications of human methodology. A species that could rapidly analyze and adapt the best aspects of every civilization they encountered would quickly become one of the most capable powers in galactic society. Ambassador Krex addressed the concern that was clearly on everyone's mind. "Captain Chen, your people have been in space for less than a century, yet you've already demonstrated the ability to defeat established military powers. How quickly might humanity's capabilities continue to develop?" Sarah considered her response carefully. Too much confidence might make them seem threatening, while too little might undermine her negotiating position. "We're still learning," she said finally. "Every interaction with other species teaches us something new. The pace of our development depends largely on how willing others are to engage with us constructively." The subtle implication wasn't lost on the council members. Humanity's continued development would be influenced by whether other species chose to work with them or against them. Cooperation would benefit everyone, while opposition might accelerate human military advancement. Ambassador Veltar seemed to reach a decision. "Perhaps we should discuss how the original trade proposals might be enhanced to reflect our improved understanding of human capabilities." This was exactly what Sarah had been hoping to hear. The demonstration of human combat effectiveness was opening doors that might have remained closed for years under normal circumstances. "We're certainly open to expanding the scope of our discussions," she replied. "Humanity has always believed that mutual benefit creates the strongest foundations for lasting relationships." The next several hours involved detailed negotiations that went far beyond the original trade agreements. The council members were now interested in technological exchanges, joint research projects, and even limited military cooperation. Sarah found herself authorized to discuss possibilities that her superiors had only dreamed of when they sent her to Nexus Point. The breakthrough moment came when Ambassador Krex made an unexpected proposal. The Vorthon Consortium would be interested in establishing a joint training program. Our security forces could benefit from exposure to human tactical thinking, while your people might learn advanced techniques from some of the galaxy's most experienced military organizations. Similar offers followed from other council members. The Centaurians wanted to discuss sharing sensor technology. The Altarians proposed cultural exchange programs, and even the Zelani expressed interest in joint scientific research. By the time the session concluded, Sarah had preliminary agreements for cooperation that exceeded her most optimistic expectations. The single fight in the arena had accomplished more for human diplomatic standing than years of conventional negotiations might have achieved. As the council members departed, several approached Sarah individually to express their personal respect for her victory and their interest in future collaboration. The change from their initial dismissive attitudes was remarkable. Ambassador Veltar was the last to leave. "Captain Chen, I hope you understand the significance of what occurred here today. Your people have earned a place at the table of galactic civilization much more quickly than anyone anticipated." "We appreciate the opportunity to contribute," Sarah replied. "Humanity has a lot to learn from other species, but we hope we can offer something valuable in return. Based on today's demonstration, I believe you can offer a great deal," the ambassador said. "However, I should warn you that not every species will react as positively as we have. Your victory may have created enemies as well as allies." Sarah nodded, understanding the warning. "We'll face whatever challenges arise. That's what humans do." As the chamber emptied, Sarah remained at the table for a few minutes, processing everything that had occurred. A single decision to accept Zekhai's challenge had transformed what should have been a routine diplomatic mission into a major breakthrough for human-galactic relations. Her communicator chimed with an incoming message from Earth. Word of the fight had already reached human space, and her superiors wanted a full report on both the combat and the subsequent negotiations. As she began composing her response, Sarah realized that this was likely just the beginning. Other species would want to test human capabilities, while humanity would need to prove that their initial success wasn't a fluke. The galaxy had just become a much more interesting place. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Zekhai's mind struggled to process the reality of her situation. Every instinct screamed at her to continue fighting, but her rational mind recognized that any movement would result in permanent damage to joints that were essential for a warrior's career. The human's hold was not just physically restraining, it was strategically perfect. "I yield," Zekhai managed to say, the words barely audible but carrying across the silent arena with devastating clarity. Sarah immediately released the hold and stepped back, offering her hand to help the fallen Kythera to her feet. The gesture surprised everyone present, including Zekhai herself. In traditional Kythera culture, victors typically claimed some form of trophy from defeated opponents. This human was instead offering assistance. Zekhai stared at the extended hand for a moment before accepting it. As Sarah helped her stand, the alien warrior felt something she had never experienced before in her career. Not shame at losing exactly, but a profound respect for an opponent who had demonstrated capabilities that seemed to transcend the normal limits of their species. The arena erupted in chaos as various alien observers tried to process what they had witnessed. Some species cheered for the unexpected outcome, while others argued in their native languages about the implications. A few groups were already placing bets on future human combat performances, while others were frantically sending messages to their home governments. The station's arena master approached the center of the fighting circle, his expression showing the same confusion that was evident throughout the crowd. In all his years of overseeing combat sports, he had never seen anything quite like what had just occurred. By the rules of traditional Kythera dueling, he announced in Standard Galactic, the human Sarah Chen is declared the victor. She has earned the right to speak for her species' honor. The formal declaration triggered another wave of discussion among the spectators. Many were beginning to realize that they had just witnessed something historically significant. The reputation of human military capabilities would spread from this moment, carried by dozens of different species to every corner of galactic civilization. But Sarah seemed uninterested in the crowd's reaction. Her attention remained focused on Zekhai, who was examining her injured arm with the clinical interest of a professional warrior assessing damage. "Your technique," Zekhai said quietly, speaking in her own language before switching back to Standard Galactic. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" Earth Defense Corps training, Sarah replied simply. But more than that, it's how humans have always fought. We're not the strongest or the fastest, so we learn to be smart about it. Zekhai's mandibles clicked in what Sarah was beginning to recognize as thoughtful consideration. Your species has only been in space for what, 50 of your years? How do you already understand Cathera anatomy better than most of our own doctors? We had good teachers, Sarah said with a slight smile. And we're very good at learning from others. Every species we've encountered has taught us something new about combat, technology, or strategy. We just absorb it all and find ways to make it work. This answer seemed to disturb Zekhai more than her defeat had. The implications of a species that could rapidly adapt and improve by incorporating the best aspects of other civilizations were staggering. If humans could do this with combat techniques, what else might they be capable of learning? The crowd was beginning to disperse, but many of the observers were lingering to get a better look at the human who had just accomplished the impossible. Sarah noticed several military uniforms among the watchers, representing species she recognized as major powers in galactic politics. A delegation of Cathera warriors had approached the arena floor, their expressions showing a mixture of concern and curiosity. They spoke briefly with Zekhai in their native language, and Sarah caught enough of the conversation to understand that they were discussing the techniques she had used. They want to know if you would be willing to share your knowledge, Zekhai translated when she noticed Sarah listening. My people respect strength above all else, and you have demonstrated capabilities that we did not know were possible. Sarah considered the request carefully. Sharing human military techniques with potential enemies could be dangerous, but it could also be an opportunity to build relationships with one of the galaxy's most influential warrior cultures. I'd be willing to discuss some basic principles, she said finally, but any formal training exchange would need to be arranged through proper diplomatic channels. The Kithra delegation seemed satisfied with this response, and several of them approached to offer formal acknowledgments of her victory. In their culture, defeating a champion in single combat earned respect that transcended species boundaries. As the alien warriors departed, Sarah found herself alone with Zekhai in the gradually emptying arena. The station's medical team had arrived to check both fighters for injuries, but Sarah had declined treatment for her minor wounds, and Zekhai's damage was mostly to her pride. I need to understand something, Zekhai said as they walked toward the arena exit. During the fight, you seemed to get stronger as it progressed. Most species would have been exhausted by that level of activity. Humans are endurance hunters, Sarah explained. Our ancestors used to chase prey animals until they collapsed from exhaustion. We evolved to keep going when others would give up. What you saw wasn't me getting stronger. It was your own energy reserves depleting while mine remained stable. Zekhai absorbed this information with the analytical mind of a professional strategist. And the techniques you used to disrupt my coordination? Pressure point fighting. We learned the basics from a species called the Altarians, then adapted it for use against different alien anatomies. Your people aren't that different from several other species we've encountered. The casual way Sarah discussed incorporating alien fighting techniques into human doctrine was both impressive and unsettling. It suggested a level of strategic thinking that went far beyond simple military training. They reached the arena's main exit, where a crowd of reporters and curious onlookers had gathered. Sarah could see the distinctive uniforms of several news services that broadcast throughout the sector, and she realized that word of the fight was already beginning to spread. Captain Chen, called out a Altarian reporter, pushing through the crowd with recording equipment. Can you comment on what this victory means for human-Cathara relations? It means that stereotypes and assumptions are often wrong, Sarah replied diplomatically. Both our species have capabilities that others might not expect. I hope this leads to better understanding between our peoples. More questions came from the crowd, but Sarah politely declined further interviews. She had a diplomatic mission to complete, and becoming a media sensation wasn't part of her orders. As she made her way through the crowd, Sarah noticed that the other species were looking at her differently now. The mixture of curiosity and dismissal she had encountered when first arriving at the station had been replaced by something approaching respect, mixed with wariness. Zekhai followed her through the crowd, and Sarah realized that the alien warrior had appointed herself as an unofficial escort. Given the Cathera's reputation, her presence was probably discouraging anyone who might have been considering challenging the human to additional combat. Where will you go now? Zekai asked as they reached the station's main corridor. I have a diplomatic meeting with the Trade Council representatives, Sarah said. Humanity is hoping to negotiate better shipping rights through this sector. That meeting may go very differently than you originally expected, Zekai observed. Word of your victory will reach the council members before you do. They will want to know what other surprises your species might have in store. Sarah smiled at this assessment. Then I guess we'll find out just how much one fight can change diplomatic relationships. Zekai's tactical mind raced as she reassessed her opponent. The partial nerve disruption in her lower left arm was already beginning to fade, but the implications of how it had been achieved were troubling. This human possessed knowledge of Kithra anatomy that rivaled what their own military medics understood. More disturbing was the precision required to target those specific pressure points during active combat. The alien warrior had built her reputation on adaptability, and she began to modify her fighting style once again. If the human could exploit traditional Kithera techniques, then perhaps it was time to abandon tradition entirely. She shifted into a more defensive posture, using her 3 fully functional arms to create an almost impenetrable barrier while her partially impaired limb recovered. Sarah recognized the change immediately. Her tactical implant highlighted the shift in Zekai's stance and suggested several potential responses. But more than technological assistance, her human intuition told her that the real fight was just beginning. The Kithera warrior had been testing her capabilities, and now that both fighters understood what they were facing, the true measure of their skills would emerge. The crowd sensed the shift as well. The initial exchanges had been impressive displays of technique, but there was something different in the air now. Both combatants were moving with the focused intensity of fighters who recognized they were facing a worthy opponent. Sarah's next attack came without warning. She launched herself forward in a diving roll that brought her beneath Zekai's guard, then sprang upward with her elbow aimed at the alien's midsection. The strike connected with the softer armor plates between the harder sections of the Kithara's natural protection, eliciting a sharp hiss of pain. But Zekai's counterattack was immediate and devastating. Her upper right arm swept down in a crushing blow that would have ended the fight if it had connected properly. Sarah twisted desperately to avoid the full force of the strike, but the alien's claws raked across her left shoulder, tearing through fabric and leaving shallow cuts in her skin. The sight of human blood on Kithera claws sent a ripple of excitement through parts of the crowd. Many had expected this outcome from the beginning, and it seemed that the natural order was finally asserting itself. But those with more combat experience noticed that the human's reaction to being wounded was not what they expected. Instead of showing pain or fear, Sarah's expression became more focused. The shallow wounds were already beginning to clot, demonstrating the remarkable healing efficiency that had helped humans survive on their dangerous homeworld. More importantly, the injury seemed to trigger something in the human psychology that most alien species didn't possess. Humans were one of the few species in known space that actually became more dangerous when wounded. Their evolutionary history as both predator and prey had developed a response to injury that increased adrenaline production and pain tolerance rather than triggering retreat behaviors. It was a trait that had puzzled xenobiologists since first contact. Sarah's next series of attacks came with increased speed and aggression. She seemed to flow around Zekai's defenses like water, striking from unexpected angles and retreating before the alien could mount effective counters. Her movements had taken on an almost preternatural quality that made it difficult for observers to track her position. Zekai found herself being systematically outmaneuvered by an opponent who should have been slowing down by now. The human's endurance was proving to be far beyond what any Kithera could maintain at this level of intensity. Every time the alien warrior thought she had established a defensive position, Sarah would find a weakness and exploit it with surgical precision. The realization that she might actually lose this fight struck Zekai like a physical blow. In all her years of combat, she had never faced an opponent who could match her speed and exceed her endurance while demonstrating such tactical sophistication. This human was rewriting everything the Kithara thought they knew about combat effectiveness. But Zekai had not survived dozens of duels by giving up when the situation looked difficult. She began to dig deeper into her reserves, calling upon the rage state that Kithara warriors could access in moments of extreme need. Her movements became more savage and less predictable as primitive instincts took control. The change was immediately apparent to everyone in the arena. Zekai's strikes gained devastating power as her civilized fighting techniques gave way to the raw fury that had made her species the most feared warriors in their sector of space. Her claws extended to their full length, and her natural armor seemed to darken as stress hormones flooded her system. Sarah recognized the shift and adapted accordingly. She had studied the psychological profiles of various alien species during her military training, and she knew that Kythera berserker rage made them incredibly dangerous, but also more predictable. The trade-off between power and control created opportunities for a fighter with sufficient skill to exploit. Instead of trying to match Zekai's increased aggression, Sarah became even more defensive. She used the arena's limited space to maximum advantage, employing the barriers and level changes to disrupt the aliens' attack patterns. Her movements became a complex dance of evasion and redirection that frustrated Zekai's attempts to bring her enhanced strength to bear. The strategy worked perfectly. Zekai's rage-enhanced attacks were devastating when they connected, but Sarah's defensive skills ensured that most of them struck empty air or glanced off at angles that minimized their impact. Meanwhile, the alien warrior was burning through her energy reserves at an unsustainable rate. But Sarah wasn't content to simply wait for her opponent to exhaust herself. Human military doctrine emphasized seizing the initiative whenever possible, and she began to weave counterattacks into her defensive pattern, quick strikes to nerve clusters, joint manipulations that disrupted Zekai's balance, and pressure point attacks that interfered with the aliens' coordination. Each successful technique built upon the previous ones, creating a cumulative effect that gradually degraded Zekai's combat effectiveness. The alien warrior's rage began to work against her as the mounting frustration of being unable to land decisive blows made her increasingly reckless. The crowd watched in stunned silence as the fight reached its climax. Many of the alien observers were seeing human combat capabilities for the first time, and the demonstration was forcing them to reconsider everything they thought they knew about this new species. The humans in the audience were equally amazed, having never seen their own military training applied at this level of expertise. Sarah's final combination began with a feint that drew all four of Zekai's arms to one side, followed by a lightning-quick transition that put her inside the alien's guard. Her next moves were a blur of precise strikes that targeted every major nerve center she had identified during the fight, culminating in a joint lock that left Zekai unable to continue her attack. The alien warrior found herself immobilized by a technique that used her own anatomy against her. The human's grip was positioned in such a way that any attempt to break free would result in serious injury to multiple joints. For the first time in her fighting career, Zekai was completely helpless. The arena fell completely silent as both fighters remained motionless, locked in position that clearly demonstrated who had emerged victorious. Sarah's breathing was elevated but controlled, while Zekai's was labored and ragged from her exertions. "Do you yield?" Sarah asked quietly, her voice carrying clearly in the hushed arena. The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galactic community thought it knew about warfare, strength, and the balance of power among the stars. Zekai moved with the fluid precision of a master predator, covering the distance between herself and Sarah in 3 powerful strides. Her forearms worked in perfect coordination, 2 striking high while the other 2 swept low, a classic Kythera opening that had defeated countless opponents across the galaxy. Sarah didn't try to meet the charge head-on. Instead, she dropped into a low crouch and rolled to her left, letting Zekai's momentum carry the alien warrior past her initial position. The crowd made various sounds of surprise as the expected quick clash turned into something more complex. What the spectators couldn't know was that Sarah had spent the past hour doing more than just mental preparation. She had accessed the station's database and studied every available recording of Kythera combat techniques. More importantly, she had run probability calculations through her tactical implant, a standard piece of Earth Defense Corps technology that helped human soldiers process battlefield information more quickly. The implant wasn't technically a weapon, and by galactic standards it was considered basic augmentation. Most species had some form of technological enhancement, though the Kythera prided themselves on relying solely on their natural abilities. What made human tactical implants different was their integration with human intuition and adaptability. Zekai spun with impressive speed, her rear arms striking toward where Sarah had rolled. But the human was already moving again, staying low and using her smaller size to remain inside the Kythera's optimal striking range. This forced Zekai to adjust her attacks, which created tiny windows of opportunity. Sarah's first strike was a quick jab to the joint where Zekai's lower left arm connected to her torso. The blow appeared to have no effect on the armored alien, but Sarah wasn't trying to cause damage yet. She was gathering information, testing the density and flexibility of the Kythera's natural armor. The arena crowd grew more animated as the fight continued beyond the first exchange. Kythera duels typically ended quickly, with one fighter establishing dominance through overwhelming force. This human's defensive strategy was something new, and it was clearly frustrating Zekai. The alien warrior adapted her approach, using her superior reach to force Sarah toward the edge of the fighting circle. Her strikes became more methodical, designed to herd rather than immediately defeat her opponent. It was a sound tactical adjustment that demonstrated why Zekai had earned her reputation as an undefeated duelist. But Sarah had been expecting this shift. Human military doctrine emphasized adaptability above all else, and she had trained for situations where retreat wasn't an option. As her back approached the energy barrier that marked the edge of the arena, she suddenly changed direction. Instead of continuing to evade, Sarah stepped inside Zekai's guard and grabbed the alien's lower right arm with both hands. Using the Kythera's own forward momentum, she executed a perfect hip throw that sent the much larger alien tumbling across the arena floor. The crowd erupted in astonished sounds from dozens of different species. No one had expected the human to possess the strength necessary to throw a Kythera warrior, let alone the technique to do it so efficiently. Zekai rolled to her feet with athletic grace. But for the first time since the fight began, her posture showed uncertainty. She had felt the power in the human's grip, the precise application of leverage that had turned her own mass against her. This small creature possessed skills that hadn't appeared in any of the combat recordings she had studied. Sarah stood in the center of the arena, her breathing still controlled and even. She had removed her hair tie during the grappling exchange, and her dark hair now framed her face as she watched Zekai carefully. Her expression remained calm, but there was something different in her eyes now, a predatory focus that several experienced warriors in the crowd recognized. "Impossible," muttered a Zalani observer in the stands. "Humans don't have the physical capability for throws like that." But others were beginning to understand what they were witnessing. The human hadn't overpowered Zekai through brute strength. She had used technique, timing, and an understanding of physics that allowed her to redirect her opponent's energy, rather than simply opposing it. Zekai approached more cautiously this time, her arms weaving in a complex pattern designed to prevent another grappling attempt. She launched a series of rapid strikes, each one aimed at a different target, forcing Sarah to defend against multiple angles of attack. Simultaneously, Sarah's response demonstrated why human soldiers were becoming respected throughout the galaxy. Despite their species' recent entry into galactic society, she didn't try to block or deflect every strike. Instead, she moved with an economy of motion that wasted no energy, avoiding what she could and redirecting what she couldn't. More importantly, she was learning. Each exchange taught her more about Kythera anatomy, revealing the tiny delays between neural command and muscular response that existed in any biological system. Her tactical implant processed this information and began predicting Zekai's movements with increasing accuracy. The fight took on a different rhythm as both combatants adapted to their opponent's capabilities. Zekai's attacks became more varied and unpredictable, while Sarah's movements grew more confident and precise. What had started as an apparent mismatch was becoming a genuine contest between two skilled fighters. But the crowd was beginning to notice something else. Despite the intensity of the combat, the human showed no signs of the fatigue that should have been affecting a creature of her size, fighting an opponent of Zekai's caliber. If anything, Sarah seemed to be getting stronger as the fight progressed. This was another aspect of human physiology that most alien species didn't understand. Humans were endurance hunters, evolved to pursue prey across vast distances until exhaustion brought down much larger and stronger animals. What appeared to be a weakness in short-term confrontations could become a decisive advantage in extended combat. Zekai was beginning to feel the effects of maintaining such an aggressive pace. Her breathing had become slightly labored, and her movements, while still precise, lacked some of their initial explosiveness. She had expected to end this fight quickly, and the prolonged engagement was taking its toll. Sarah recognized the shift immediately. Her tactical training had taught her to watch for these moments when an opponent's capabilities began to decline. She started to press her attacks more aggressively, no longer content to simply evade and counter. Her next move surprised everyone in the arena. Instead of continuing the pattern of defensive fighting that had characterized the match so far, Sarah suddenly went on the offensive. She feinted high with her left hand, drawing two of Zekhai's arms up to block, then dropped low and swept the alien's legs. Zekhai's superior reflexes allowed her to avoid falling, but her recovery left her briefly off balance. Sarah exploited the opening with a series of precise strikes to pressure points she had identified during their earlier exchanges. Her attacks weren't designed to penetrate the Kythera's natural armor, but to target the nerve clusters that existed at specific joint locations. The effect was immediate and visible. Zekhai's lower left arm began to respond more slowly to her commands, the nerve disruption affecting her coordination. It was a technique that required precise anatomical knowledge and perfect timing, skills that most of the watching aliens hadn't realized humans possessed. For the first time since the combat began, Zekhai took a step backward. Her mandibles clicked in what her species used to express confusion or concern. This fight was not proceeding according to any scenario she had anticipated, and the human's capabilities seemed to exceed everything she had been told about the species. Sarah pressed her advantage but remained careful not to overcommit. She had gained the initiative, but Zekhai was still an extremely dangerous opponent. The alien warrior's remaining 3 arms were fully functional, and her natural weapons could still cause serious damage if they connected properly. The arena had grown quieter as the spectators focused intently on the combat. What had begun as entertainment was becoming something more significant, a demonstration that the balance of power in galactic society might be shifting in ways that no one had fully anticipated. The space station nexus point buzzed with activity as beings from dozens of species conducted their daily business. Merchants hawked exotic goods, diplomats negotiated trade agreements, and mercenaries sought their next contracts. Among them all, one figure stood out not for her size or exotic appearance, but for the quiet confidence that seemed to radiate from her every step. Captain Sarah Chen of the Earth Defense Corps moved through the crowded marketplace with practiced ease, her brown hair tied back in a simple ponytail, her uniform crisp despite the long journey from Earth. She carried herself like someone who had seen combat but wasn't looking for trouble. Unfortunately, trouble had a way of finding humans wherever they went in the galaxy. The Kythera were known throughout the sector as the greatest warriors the galaxy had ever produced. Standing nearly 8 feet tall, with chitinous exoskeletons that could deflect most small arms fire and 4 powerful arms ending in razor-sharp claws, they had conquered 17 star systems before the Galactic Council had managed to negotiate a peace treaty. Even now, decades later, few species dared to challenge a Kythera to single combat. Zekhai was considered exceptional even among her own people. Her deep purple exoskeleton bore the ritual scars of countless victories, and her reputation as an undefeated duelist had spread far beyond Kythera space. She commanded a battalion of elite warriors and had never met an opponent who could match her speed, strength, or tactical brilliance. So when she spotted the lone human sitting at a corner table in the station's main cantina, nursing what appeared to be an earth beverage, her interest was immediately piqued. She had heard stories about these newcomers to galactic society. Supposedly they were weak, soft-bodied creatures who had somehow managed to defeat the Zalani hive in their first major interstellar conflict. Most Kythera dismissed these tales as propaganda or luck. Zekhai approached the human's table with the fluid grace of a predator. Other patrons quickly moved out of her way, recognizing the danger in her posture. The human looked up as the Kythera's shadow fell across her table, and Zekhai was surprised to see no fear in those dark eyes, only mild curiosity. "You are the human called Chen," Zekhai stated in heavily accented Standard Galactic. It wasn't a question. She had done her research during the 3 days since the human transport had docked at Nexus Point. "Captain Chen, yes," Sarah replied calmly, taking another sip of her coffee. "And you're Zekhai, the duelist of the 4th Fleet. Your reputation precedes you." The fact that this small creature knew who she was both pleased and irritated Zekhai. "I have come to settle a matter of honor," she announced. her voice carrying clearly across the now silent cantina. Your species claims to be warriors, yet you appear weak and fragile. I challenge you to single combat to test the truth of human courage. Sarah set down her cup carefully and studied the imposing alien warrior. She had expected something like this might happen. Earth's recent victories had made humanity something of a curiosity among the galactic community, and there were always those who wanted to test the newcomers. She had hoped to complete her diplomatic mission without incident, but apparently that wasn't in the cards. I see, she said quietly. And what are the terms of this challenge? Traditional Cathara dueling, Zekai replied immediately. No weapons, no armor beyond what nature provided. Combat continues until one participant yields or is unable to continue. The winner claims the right to speak for their species' honor. The crowd that had gathered around them murmured in various alien languages. Most seemed to view this as little more than an execution. The few humans present looked worried, while the other species watched with morbid curiosity. Sarah stood slowly, and even at her full height, she barely reached the middle of Zekai's chest. The size difference was almost comical, and several aliens made what sounded like amused chittering sounds, but Sarah's expression remained calm, almost contemplative. I accept your challenge, she said simply. Zekai's mandibles clicked in what might have been approval or anticipation. The combat will take place in 1 hour at the station's arena level. Come prepared to defend your species' reputation, human. As the Cathara warrior strode away, the crowd began to disperse, most heading toward the arena level to secure good viewing positions. Sarah remained at her table, finishing her coffee while her mind ran through everything she knew about Cathara physiology and fighting techniques. The arena level of Nexus Point had been designed to accommodate various species' concepts of honor combat. The fighting pit was a circle of reinforced deck plating, surrounded by energy barriers to protect the spectators. As the hour passed, word of the impending duel spread throughout the station, and the viewing areas filled with representatives of dozens of species. Many had come expecting to witness the quick death of an overconfident human. Cathara were apex predators evolved on a world where only the strongest survived. Their forearms allowed them to attack and defend simultaneously. Their natural armor could turn aside most bladed weapons, and their speed was legendary among ground fighters. Humans, on the other hand, were known to most of the galaxy as recent newcomers who had managed a few lucky victories against relatively weak opponents. They were bipedal, soft-skinned, and appeared to lack any natural weapons or armor. The smart money was on Zekai ending the fight within the first few minutes. Sarah entered the arena wearing simple athletic clothing that allowed for maximum mobility. She had removed her uniform jacket and boots, leaving her in a sleeveless shirt and flexible pants. To most observers, she looked hopelessly outmatched. Zekai entered from the opposite side, her purple exoskeleton gleaming under the arena lights. She had also removed any technological enhancements, but her natural weapons and armor made her appear far more formidable than her human opponent. The station's arena master, an elderly Taurian with ceremonial scarring across his horn-covered skull, stepped forward to announce the terms of combat and ensure both participants understood the rules. Traditional Cathara dueling was simple: fight until one could no longer continue. As the two fighters took their positions at opposite ends of the circle, Sarah closed her eyes briefly, centering herself in the way she had been taught during her military training. When she opened them again, her gaze was steady and focused. Zekai raised all forearms in a traditional Cathara battle stance, her claws extended and her posture perfect for either attack or defense. She had studied recordings of human combat techniques during her preparation, but nothing she had seen suggested these creatures possessed any special abilities that could overcome natural Cathara advantages. The arena master raised his arm, then brought it down sharply. Begin! The challenge arena had been transformed into something resembling a military testing ground. Multiple environments had been constructed to test different aspects of combat capability: urban warfare simulation, zero-gravity combat, environmental hazard navigation, and psychological pressure scenarios. Representatives from over 30 species filled the observation areas, making this the most watched event in Nexus Point's history. Sarah stood at the entrance to the testing ground, wearing standard Earth Defense Corps battle gear that had been approved by the challenge arbitrators. Beside her, Zekhai reviewed the final tactical briefing they had developed during their intense preparation sessions. "Remember," the Kithara warrior said quietly, "the hegemony expects you to fight like other species they've encountered. Use their assumptions against them." The challenge format was deliberately complex. Sarah would face 4 different scenarios, each one designed to test capabilities that the hegemony considered essential for advanced military civilizations. Failure in any single scenario would result in humanity being classified as militarily inferior. The first scenario was single combat against a hegemony champion, similar to her fight with Zekhai, but against an opponent specifically chosen for their reputation as an undefeatable warrior. The second involved tactical problem-solving under fire, requiring both physical and mental capabilities. The third tested adaptability against unknown alien technologies, while the fourth would challenge her ability to operate in hostile environments that pushed human physiology to its limits. "Captain Chen," announced the challenge administrator, a neutral Altarian official, "are you prepared to begin the trial?" Sarah nodded, noting that the hegemony delegation was watching her with barely concealed satisfaction. They clearly expected this challenge to end human pretensions to military significance. The first opponent was a draconian warrior named Kethvor, whose species was known for their exceptional size, strength, and natural weapons. Standing nearly 10 feet tall with armored scales and retractable claws, Draconians had earned reputations as some of the most formidable individual fighters in known space. Kethvor entered the arena with the confidence of someone who had never been defeated in formal combat. His scaled hide gleamed under the artificial lighting, and his movements demonstrated the fluid power that had made his species feared throughout their region of space. "This will be brief," he announced in a voice that carried clearly throughout the observation areas. "Humans are too weak to pose any real challenge." Sarah said nothing in response, instead focusing on the lessons she had learned from her fight with Zekhai. Every species had strengths, but they also had weaknesses that could be exploited by someone with sufficient knowledge and skill. The combat began with Kethavor's typical aggressive approach, using his size and reach advantages to dominate the fighting space. But Sarah had spent the past 3 days studying draconian anatomy and combat techniques with Zekhai's assistance. She knew exactly how to respond. Instead of trying to match her opponent's strength, she focused on mobility and precision. Draconian scales were nearly impenetrable, but the joints between them were vulnerable to correctly applied pressure. Their great strength came with reduced flexibility, creating opportunities for someone quick enough to exploit them. The fight lasted longer than Kethvor had expected, and Sarah's defensive skills gradually began to frustrate the massive warrior. His attacks became more aggressive and less controlled, exactly what she had been waiting for. Her victory came through a combination technique that used the Draconian's own momentum against him, resulting in a joint lock that left him unable to continue. The arena fell silent as another supposedly superior warrior yielded to human capabilities. The second scenario tested tactical thinking under pressure. Sarah was placed in a simulated command situation where she had to coordinate defensive operations against multiple attacking forces while dealing with equipment failures and casualty reports. This challenge played directly to human strengths. The scenario was designed to overwhelm decision-making capabilities through information overload. But human tactical training emphasized processing multiple data streams simultaneously. Sarah's performance exceeded all expectations, demonstrating strategic thinking that impressed even the hegemony observers. The third scenario involved unknown alien technology that she was required to understand and operate under combat conditions. The test was designed to favor species with specific technological aptitudes, but human adaptability once again proved decisive. Sarah approached the alien systems with the methodical analysis that characterized human problem-solving. Instead of trying to understand every component, she focused on identifying basic operational principles that could be applied regardless of the specific technology involved. Within minutes, she was operating systems that had taken other species hours to master. The final scenario was perhaps the most challenging: extended combat operations in an environment that pushed human physiology beyond its normal limits. The hegemony had constructed a testing ground with atmospheric conditions, temperature extremes, and gravitational variations that should have incapacitated most species, but they had underestimated human endurance and adaptability. Sarah's performance in the environmental challenge demonstrated why her species had managed to survive and thrive on one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds. What should have been her weakest area became another demonstration of unexpected human capabilities. When the final scenario concluded, the arena fell completely silent. Sarah had not merely passed the hegemony's challenges, she had exceeded them in ways that forced everyone present to reconsider their assumptions about human military potential. The challenge administrator reviewed the results with obvious amazement before making the formal announcement. Captain Sarah Chen has successfully completed all 4 scenarios of the hegemony challenge. By the ancient protocols, humanity is hereby recognized as possessing advanced military capabilities worthy of full participation in galactic civilization. The hegemony delegation sat in stunned silence, their plan to eliminate human influence having backfired spectacularly. Instead of proving human weakness, they had provided Sarah with a platform to demonstrate capabilities that exceeded even their most optimistic projections. Ambassador Veltar approached Sarah as she exited the testing ground. "Captain, your performance today will be studied and discussed throughout the galaxy for generations to come. You've not only secured humanity's position in galactic society, you've established your people as a power that must be respected." But Sarah's thoughts were already turning to the implications of what had occurred. The challenges had revealed human capabilities to potential enemies as well as allies. Future conflicts would be fought by opponents who understood what they were facing. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly to Zekai, who had waited for her at the arena exit. "Yes," the Kithara warrior agreed. "Your people will face new challenges now, from species who see you as a threat rather than an opportunity. But today you proved that humans can handle whatever the galaxy presents." As news of Sarah's victory spread throughout Nexus Point and beyond, the balance of power in galactic civilization began to shift in ways that no one could have predicted. Humanity had announced its arrival as a major force, and the galaxy would never be the same. In her final report to Earth, Sarah wrote, "Mission objectives exceeded. Humanity is no longer an unknown quantity in galactic politics. We are now recognized as equals among the stars, with all the opportunities and responsibilities that recognition brings." The alien warrior, who had challenged a human to a duel, had never expected it would end with her species gaining one of their most valuable allies, while humanity discovered that their greatest strength wasn't their individual capabilities, but their ability to learn, adapt, and build relationships across the vast diversity of galactic civilization.